Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Singapore International Energy Week, Energy Insights. Our program will begin in 10 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the SIEW Energy Insights. Our program will be commencing shortly. Before we begin, we would like to run through some housekeeping announcements. If you would like to post a question to any of our speakers, you may use the Q&A platform on the right of your window. Thank you. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Singapore International Energy Week, Energy Insights. I am Kylie from the Energy Market Authority, your MC today. Before we begin, here are some housekeeping announcements. If you would like to pose a question to any of our speakers, please use the Q&A function to the right of your screen. Without any further ado, I am pleased to invite our first speaker of the afternoon, Mr. Thomas Baudleau, Chief Executive Officer, ENGIE Southeast Asia. Mr. Baudleau, please.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Thomas Baudleau, CEO for ENGIE Southeast Asia. This afternoon session is dedicated to give you a bit of insight on the energy transition. I will take the opportunity of this speaking slot to update you on what we're doing at ENGIE to accelerate this transition, and also introduce why R&D, and in particular our RATES project, makes a lot of sense into this transformation. So if we start with a bit of context on the first slide of this presentation, if we go to the next slide, please. 2020 has been, by any given standard, a very surprising year. COVID has impacted fundamentally the way we work, the way we have lived, but it has also given us an opportunity to take a step back and realize that there is a much more existential threat that stands ahead of us, which is the climate change. And that if we don't start to address in a systemic way this threat, we will be in much bigger peril than what we're living today under the current crisis health. This is why it's absolutely of utmost importance that private sector, public sector join hands in a coordinated effort to fight and address challenges that climate change will give to mankind. I would say that in the post-COVID area, in the aftermath of COVID, there is a real opportunity to channel the investment that all the public authorities will do to sustain their economy, so that they address real sustainable issue and promote the development of sustainable infrastructure throughout the world, but in particular in the region. And if you go to the next slide, please, there are reasons to be optimistic. We are today already in a situation where green energy is becoming the most interesting energy to deploy at scale worldwide, but in particular in some countries of the region. If you look at Malaysia or Philippines, for example, solar is already today the cheapest energy source. And there is no doubt that governments and private companies such as ENGIE are looking to deploy renewable capacity at scale in the years to come all throughout the region. In fact, if you take only Malaysia and Philippines combined, we're looking at 40 gigawatts that should come in line, 40 gigawatts of additional renewable capacity that should come in line within the next 10 years, which is absolutely enormous. Along with this availability of a green power source that is also economically the most relevant, we will face within the next 10 years the emergence of what I call cheap storage, and also maybe new technological gaps in the storage solutions, which will further disrupt the energy market in a good way and give us opportunity to accelerate even more the deployment of clean energy. And if you combine that with the fact that we're seeing today the Asian grid taking shape, it's been talked a lot in the past few years, but we are seeing governments taking action and real business opportunities, concrete industrial projects happening that are showcasing the real potential of integrating all the countries of Southeast Asia into a single and cleaner grid. aside from this availability of a clean energy source, I would say that we're also facing a momentum around energy efficiency in the region. Solutions such as district cooling are gaining a lot of attention. In fact, if you see what's going on in Singapore, all new districts around the country embeds district cooling solutions at design stage. And there is no more question about whether or not this solution is the right way to go for the region in the future. Besides Singapore, you see a number of projects happening in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Philippines, and you can see that the challenge around the growth of urban areas and the growth in cooling need will need to be solved thanks to those very efficient infrastructure. So how is ENGIE trying to be a part of this landscape and part of the solution to accelerate the energy transition? If you go to the next slide, we were a traditional IPP a few years ago, and we were amongst the first to realize that there was no sustainable future that would rely on coal generation, and therefore we were a few years back among the first IPPs to completely exit and stop the development of new coal capacity. But we went further than that and developed a wide range of solutions that allowed us to lower our carbon footprint as we conduct our business. And as a result, today, we're in a position to propose to our customers to lower their energy footprint and go towards a greener energy mix. We went a step further even, and we wrote into our DNA, into our bylaws, our purpose, which is to accelerate the transition towards a carbon neutral world. So it's very exciting that ENGIE is really at the core of the biggest challenge that mankind will face in the near future. And if you look at the next slide, in the region in Southeast Asia, we have built amongst the years a real base of activity that will allow us to play a significant role in the energy transition of Southeast Asia. If you look at energy production, we have almost 300 megawatt up and running of clean energy, either solar or geothermal, and this capacity is only increasing day after day. So it's installed capacity under construction, and we have today a pipe of opportunities to be developed in the years to come that goes beyond 2 gigawatts, which is absolutely massive. And along with those clean and green energy capacity, we are working across a wide range of solutions and industries to propose to our customers ways to lower their energy footprint. We are extremely big on district cooling, but I will tell you a bit more about that in the next slide. We are doing a lot. No, keep the previous slide. We are doing a lot on energy efficiency. If we could just go back to the previous slide, please. We have a wide range of facilities management services, and we can really target all the industries that are heavy energy consumers to address their energy need and try to lower them with solutions that range with design, efficient installation, and efficient operation of the facilities for our customers. And data center, for example, is one of the industries we are focusing a lot. Singapore is acting as our development hub for the region. There is no better place to be than in Singapore to do business around the whole region. This is why we chose Singapore as our headquarters for Asia Pacific, for Southeast Asia. But we have also localized a lot of expertise in the country. Our research and development lab is anchored in Singapore since a few years. but we also have very dedicated center of expertise around district cooling, energy efficiency, or digital solutions that sits in Singapore and support the development of business all across the region. So if you go to the next slide, I wanted to give you some ideas, some references of projects and solutions we are already deploying right now, which are helping make a difference and boost this energy transition. What you're seeing here is our Northgate reference. It's a district cooling we deployed in the northern part of Manila with our partner Philinvest. We basically distribute air conditioning through a network, through an infrastructure, which is much more efficient than cooling each building individually. And we supply air conditioning to a call center city, a city that groups a lot of call centers in the Philippines. And by deploying such technologies, we have managed to reduce the energy consumption necessary to cool the city by 40%, 40, which is absolutely outstanding and give you a good indication of the relevance of such solution for a more sustainable future. If you go to the next slide, obviously, we are working as well on broader agreements that go beyond just one solution. Here you have an example of an agreement we have signed with Springfield, a city in Australia, for which during 50 years we will work in collaboration to help make the city ultimately carbon neutral, which is absolutely outstanding. And during those 50 years, ENGIE will design, install, finance, and operate all utility systems that will help reduce the energy consumption and make the energy greener in this city so that it can reach a carbon neutrality at some point in time. Obviously, today we don't have all the technologies that are necessary to reach a carbon neutrality for a whole city. And this is a very good transition for the next slide, please. For the way we see the R&D, research and development role in support of our development in the region. Well, the way ENGIE sees R&D is in a very pragmatic way. And we have narrowed down the essential and key areas where we need to invest into R&D and find new technologies to trigger and enable a carbon neutrality within a 5 to 10 years time frame. So you can see on this slide a few of the technologies we have identified as essential. You would find green gas, hydrogen, electric charging vehicle infrastructure, green mobility. It's a set of very targeted technologies that will be part of tomorrow's energy mix. And we work hand in hand with our R&D department on concrete projects that we know will make a difference in a relatively short time frame, which is a perfect transition for the project we will speak about today. If you go to the next slide, REEDS is a perfect mix of today's technology and tomorrow's potential for a green and carbon neutral energy future. REEDS is a microgrid, so a project that combines a lot of energy sources from today, solar, for example, wind, but also tomorrow's technology such as hydrogen, and help us design and operate what will be the systems that provide green energy to cities, to villages when they are not connected to the grid. And this really allows us to build a concrete business case, invest into efficient energy management system so that once technology matures, we are fully ready to scale them and bring them to the market. But before I leave the floor to the team to explain to you a bit more about READS, which is a beautiful project, I wanted to conclude my presentation. If you go to the next slide, by a bit of an interactive session. So I would like those of you who have their phone with them to take your phone and scan the QR code that is appearing on the screen right now. It will take you to a web page where you can input any address you wish. And by doing so, we will be able to showcase to you what green solar capacity we can deploy on this address, what this capacity can help you save in terms of CO2, in terms of energy consumption, and in terms of dollar as well. So that way you can see that all of us can be part of the energy transition, and we have the technologies today to accelerate things. Thank you very much. I will leave the floor now to the READS team.
Thank you, Mr. Bodlo. Next, we would like to invite Loic Viocel, Director, NG Lab Singapore, and Dr. Peng Xiaoyang, R&D Manager, NG Lab Singapore, for their presentation. Mr. Viocel and Dr. Peng, please.
All right, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute, I think. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Thomas, for this very insightful introduction. I'm Loic Viocel, Managing Director with the NG Lab Singapore, which is the research center of NG in APAC region. And I'm indeed very happy to present you today our flagship project called READS. That's a coincidence to have this SIEW week at the same time as the full commissioning of this project. But indeed, we're going to commission this R&D test bed at the end of this week, the day after tomorrow. And we will officially inaugurate the site on the 26th of November. So we will go into the details of the project with Dr. Peng Xiaoyang, who is with me and who is the smart grid manager of the team, and will be in charge of the operations of the site. And on my side, I will be telling you more about NG's R&D strategy, priorities, and main projects globally and more specifically in the region. If you go to next slide. Yeah, so Thomas told you about the strategy already of NG Group. NG decided to reposition its strategy towards energy transition and carbon neutral economy back in 2016, committing to greenify all the assets we own by 2050. And to make the big switch a reality at a global scale, it is key to invest in research and innovation to bring down the cost, to de-risk emerging technologies. And NG decided to invest in research with a special focus on energy efficiency, green gases and hydrogen, distributed energy systems, energy access, future building, future industry, smart grid, smart cities, green mobility, just to name, I would say, some of the main topics. And to address all these topics, NG's research relies on a global network of 23 thematic labs and 8 research centers worldwide. So the 2 main research centers are located in Europe, one next to Paris called ENGIE Lab Crigen, and another one located in Belgium called ENGIE Lab Borelec. If you move to the next slide, we can see the map with this global network. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yes, thanks. So you can see all this network on the map. And ENGIE Lab Singapore is part of this global network to be, I would say, closer to the local needs, to better answer to the market in APEC region, and with the access to the expertise of this global network worldwide of ENGIE research. If we move to the next slide, you can see here the two main missions in a way of the lab. Work on long-term innovation, innovative carbon neutral technologies to de-risk technologies on the long term and cut down the cost. This cannot be possible without collaboration, without partnerships. So we develop pilots with the key partners in the local ecosystem. And at the same time, we need to be, to answer to Thomas' needs, we need to be business oriented as much as possible with short time to market technologies in order to bring technical expertise to the ENGIE entities and to bring innovation and added value in the commercial offers. So to answer to the business needs, we need to be able to cover multi-thematics and at the same time to be efficient in our research work. We need to be focused. So if you move to the next slide. Right, no, you can come back to the previous one, sorry. So yeah, I will tell you anyway a bit later during the presentation a bit more about our priorities. But just to make it short, we've been focused so far on 3 pillars: smart grid, energy efficiency in the industry, and smart cities. And following a 5-year roadmap, we've been through the beginning of the year to better identify the key topics we should focus on in the coming years. We will focus in the future on 2 main new R&D focus areas: cooling technologies and the sustainable data centers. So I will tell you a bit more about it at the end of the presentation. So if you move to the next slide, I'm going to present you very briefly some of the flagship projects of the lab. So the first one is the development of a new cooling technology based on sky cooling technology with a material which reflects solar energy during the day and can send heat to the cold space during the night, thanks to infrared radiation in the atmospheric transparency window. So it sounds a bit magical, but there's already a first trial in our research center in France. And the idea is to complement this trial with performance data in tropical conditions before deploying this technology on buildings in Singapore and beyond. We signed end of last year an MOU with JTC in October 2019. And we are in discussion at the moment with JTC for different opportunities of R&D pilots related to cooling, related to building, related to smart food. And this project should be the first one to be co-developed with JTC, targeting end of this year, early beginning of next year. And it should happen in the BCA Sky Lab in Singapore. The second project, which is as well an important project for us within the lab, is a project we've worked together with another team of NTU, more specifically the Thermal Energy System Lab of NTU, to develop a cryogenic liquid air energy storage solution, co-generating both cold and power, and for different applications, starting as a backup power, as a backup solution for data centers and to replace diesel genset, and targeting later to provide different services for data centers and district cooling to improve the energy efficiency and decarbonize these sectors. Urbana Jurong has shown interest as well in this topic, so we are in discussion at the moment, possibly to sign a tripartite MOU together between ENGIE-Lab, Singapore, Urbana Jurong, and SIEW to move ahead together on the topic. And last but not least, and that's the focus of today, so it's time to pass you the floor, Xiaoyang, is the ReadSport platform. So yeah, I leave you the floor, Xiaoyang. Thank you.
Thank you, Loic. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Xiaoyang, the program manager for Smart Grid program in ENGIE-Lab Singapore, and the lead for the ReadSport project. ReadSport project is a project under the REAS initiative, which stands for Renewable Energy Integration Demonstrator Singapore, led by Energy Research Institute at Nanyang Technological University. Today, we're very happy to announce that actually the ReadSport platform, our ENGIE microgrid, will be fully commissioned in the next couple of days. If we can move to the next slide. We see that the story goes way back in 2016 when the REAS initiative was first announced and when actually the ENGIE-Lab Singapore was founded as well. As a founding member of the lab myself, I had the opportunity to work alongside this project from the starting point until today. In the previous 4+ years, we are working very hard on constructing the platform as well as some desktop research topics related. We have gone through many difficulties in the engineering, procurement, and construction activities, and we have accomplished numerous tasks, including erecting the biggest wind turbine in Singapore and commissioned the innovative hydrogen food chain from production to electricity and mobility usages. Now we are looking at the official inauguration of the platform on November 26th. If we move on to the next slide, we can see that actually the project is fundamentally looking at how to work towards a carbon neutral economy through the implementation of microgrid to cope with the increasing demand of electricity as well as many challenges along the way, including costs and aging networks. We have decided to work hand in hand with our partners in demonstrating microgrid solutions supported by the Economic Development Board in collaboration with NTU and Schneider Electric. The REAS initiative is launched with ENGIE, bringing a multi-fluid microgrid solution demonstrator. Next slide, please. The REAS initiative has a dedicated plot on Semakau landfill, known as the plot P2. Within this plot, many industrial players have come together and install or plan to install their solutions in demonstrating different technologies, among which ENGIE's ReadSport platform is the largest and the most sophisticated microgrid amongst all industrial collaborators. If we move on to the next slide, we can see how actually the project evolved along the way on ENGIE's side. In the first beginning, it was first started to look into off-grid applications to solve the issue for electricity access in Southeast Asia. However, with the project moving on, we have decided to demonstrate some more advanced technologies to form a multi-fluid microgrid with hydrogen in our case. This way, it could benefit both on-grid and off-grid applications. And recently, with the commissioning of the platform drawing near, we are looking even beyond the multi-fluid microgrid, but demonstrating, testing relevant, innovative, low-carbon solutions on the platform. If we go to the next slide, we can see here the overview of the soon-to-be commissioned ReadSport microgrid. As you can see, green electricity is generated from solar PV, wind turbine, and backed up with the diesel gensets if necessary. Such green electricity is used to supply to an artificial load, which can be programmed to reproduce different end users. The surplus of this generated green electricity is then stored in battery or in the form of hydrogen in the hydrogen system on site. In time of need, such stored energy can be converted back into back into the green electricity to supply the artificial end users. Not only that, interestingly, on this platform with the hydrogen system, we can also use the generated hydrogen for other usages, such as mobility. And for demonstrating this aspect, we have deployed a hydrogen vehicle on site. I'm going to show you some pictures in the next few slides. This is the wind turbine that we have installed on Semakau landfill. It is currently the tallest wind turbine in Singapore, which is 42 meters from the bottom to the tip of the blades. This wind turbine could normally generate 100 kilowatts at its rated wind speed, although we would expect the output to be only at 20 to 40% most of the time during the testing. And of course, on the right-hand side, you will see 3 diesel gen sets installed on site for backup usages. And it is also to demonstrate the scenario when a microgrid with renewable energy can retrofit a brownfield site with existing diesel gen sets. If you go to the next slide, we can see the PV panels installed on site, which are the main renewable sources on the platform. There are in total of 200 kilowatt peak of PV panels to generate green electricity during the daytime. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the battery energy storage, which is a way to counter the intermittency of renewable generation like PV, and also a way to store energy in chemical form in order to supply to the load when renewable energy generation is low, to avoid using diesel gen sets. In the next slide, the most interesting part of this platform is to demonstrate the multi-fluid aspect, and it lies in the hydrogen full chain system that you can see here, which consisting of a hydrogen power-to-power system, a hydrogen refueling station, and a hydrogen car. If we move to the next slide, you would see the hydrogen power-to-power system basically consists of an electrolyzer, which generates green hydrogen using the green electricity generated on site and water. There is also a fuel cell to generate electricity with the green hydrogen that is stored, and also it includes the hydrogen and oxygen storage tanks. This demonstrates the usage of hydrogen in the form of electricity storage. Next, please. This is the hydrogen refueling station that is installed on site. It is in the purpose to demonstrate the use of hydrogen in another form, mobility. It is fundamentally a gas station for a car or a charging port for an EV. The only difference between these aforementioned stations is that the hydrogen refueling station actually charge a hydrogen tank within the hydrogen vehicle, and they can actually charge as fast as a normal gas station in 2 to 5 minutes. If you move to the next slide, you could find the hydrogen car that we deployed on site. It is actually a fuel cell electric vehicle, which is fundamentally an EV with a hydrogen range extender. The range extender is able to extend the original range of the car, which is around 100 kilometers, up to 300 kilometers using the same setup. Next, please. And last but not least, to make all the complicated system work properly and optimally, we have implemented the full suite of management system consisting of power management system from Schneider Electric, the energy management system from NG ourselves, and the supervisor control and data acquisition system from the collaboration of NG and Schneider. These systems have their respective roles and responsibilities in terms of management, and also to ensure the normal and optimal behavior of all the equipment, including in the hydrogen food chain. So if we move to the next one, we are looking at the future of the platform. In NG Lab Singapore and NG Research, we believe we need to use this platform and contribute to the fact that we are moving towards a carbon neutral economy. And here are the things that we are looking at for this living lab that we have built here. First and foremost, for site visit and showcase, we plan to open the site to internal and external parties upon request to promote green solutions, and of course, to promote the basic knowledge of renewables and other innovative technologies. And for the last one, with the data generated on site, we would like to create our own database with regards to performances of technologies in different scenarios. By having this data, we look to collaborate with the different partners to develop, to enhance, or to fine-tune some innovative technologies. And in the next 2 slides, I would like to highlight the test bedding and training usage that I mentioned here. So as mentioned, the platform is fundamentally a living lab of itself. It will be in operation. We will conduct testing along the way, and we plan to use it to demonstrate and test technologies that can contribute to carbon neutrality. It can be used to validate performances, to showcase, to benchmark. Specifically, it can be used to test technologies relating to solar, to energy storage, to digital solutions, leveraging on the site and the infrastructure that is already there. It can be coupled with other utilities utilizing certain equipment of the site. And it can also be about testing technologies by making use of the whole platform, or even with our partners' platform upstream. This way, we believe that we can fully utilize the destiny of this platform as a living lab. And if we move to the next slide, we would like also to use this platform as a training center that provides different levels of training program. It can be educational training for general public, for students. It can be professional trainings to talk about international and local standards, as well as operating and maintaining skills. And it can also be expertise trainings to provide some in-depth knowledge on a specific technology on site, or understand the whole context of control, cybersecurity, energy management, etc. So in summary, moving forward, NG Lab Singapore will use this platform as a living lab for multi-purpose and multi-topic, and providing opportunities as an R&D testbed in real and tropical conditions. This is in line with NG's group strategy towards carbon neutrality and to address the 4 switches of the energy transition in Singapore. Before my colleague, Loic, tells you more about the NG's future R&D roadmap, in the APAC, we have prepared a video that will showcase the REIT Sport platform.
NG's purpose is to act in order to accelerate the transition towards a carbon neutral economy through innovative solutions to save energy and through environmentally friendly solutions. Despite the fact that it has been only recently incorporated in our bylaws, it was already our purpose back in 2016 when we were thinking about developing new solutions for energy transition in Southeast Asia. But thinking was not enough, and we wanted to act. And that's why we decided to create NG Lab Singapore, and we decided to invest in the REITs laboratory on Semakau Island. That's what we are doing now.
Thanks to its 900 researchers and 22 labs, NG Research supports NG's strategy to accelerate the transition towards a carbon-neutral economy. Connected to the Asia-Pacific R&D ecosystem, NG Lab Singapore is one of these labs and has been developing expertise in 3 programs: smart grids, industry energy efficiency, and smart cities. The REIT Sport platform is a state-of-the-art multi-fluid microgrid solution at Semakau landfill. This project is important for NG Research because it will enable NG to address the issue of energy access for off-grid areas and provide a test bench to test innovative low-carbon solutions in a tropical environment.
Energy sources including Singapore's tallest wind turbine, a PV farm, and 3 diesel gensets, providing backup power and demonstrating the solution's scalability. A load bank reproduces load profiles for testing. A hydrogen full chain system provides clean electrical power and mobility. It consists of hydrogen power-to-power unit with fuel cell, electrolyzer, and hydrogen storage, the hydrogen refueling station, and the fuel cell electric vehicle. All assets operate harmoniously with the 3-layer management system: the power management system, the energy management system, and the supervisory control and data acquisition system. ENGIE's cybersecurity technologies guarantee a safe platform. Addressing the 4 switches of energy transition, RITSPO will serve as a living lab and training platform for industry and professionals, a public learning center. It is a showcase of ENGIE's capability when it comes to carbon-neutral technologies to fight against climate change.
This project is a game changer for renewable applications in Southeast Asia, demonstrating the viability of integrating a highly intelligent multi-energy microgrid using solutions from multiple vendors. NTU has invested heavily in the microgrid, energy storage, and smart multi-energy systems, and REITs is one of our major flagships. With the support of industry partners like ENGIE, REITs have grown from a single microgrid to a multi-microgrid platform involving over 30 industry players.
ENGIE Lab Singapore is developing a new 5-year roadmap in alignment with the group strategy and interest of the local ecosystem. One new priority is cooling, an important topic for tropical countries like Singapore and in the age of global warming. The lab will investigate the entire cooling value chain, including production, storage, transportation, optimization, and urban planning, and for different applications, more specifically cooling technologies for building and vertical farming use. Another new priority will be sustainable data centers. ENGIE Lab Singapore will lead this topic worldwide for ENGIE research, identifying key research areas and developing first pilots to test the solutions, and focusing on quick win, business-oriented innovative solutions with short time to market, and at the same time, looking into longer-term, game-changing technologies in the data center value chain.
ENGIE, leading the world towards carbon neutrality. For more information, visit engie.com.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this video. I think with Sherry-Young's presentation and this branding, freshly branding, new branding video, you've got really the overview of this RITSPO project. And even I will say the first overview of the lab we want to build from now onwards with the new topics we will focus here in Singapore and in the region when it comes to research and development. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is, in a way, the story I started to tell a bit earlier in the presentation, which shows the historical focuses of the lab, which was created in 2016. So between 2016 and today, smart grid, future cities, and future industry. And you can see this shift in a way in terms of priorities from these 3 historical pillars towards sustainable data centers and cooling. And at the same time, it doesn't mean we will forget about all the expertise we've been developing so far since 2016 on the historical pillars. It's going to be very useful to be efficient on the new topics, to have this expertise locally. And let's keep in mind that part of our role is to support the business, and so all this expertise will be needed as well for the technical support we bring to the ENGIE entities in general in the region. If you move to the next slide. So just a word on sustainable data centers. So ENGIE Lab Singapore will lead this, as I said in the video, will lead the topic worldwide for all the global network I presented you within ENGIE Research. When it comes to data centers, there's indeed an increasing attention on the carbon footprint of the data centers, with changes in national regulation, like in Singapore, with a stricter sustainability standard to be met after 2021. In Europe, data centers are required to move away from diesel completely by 2030. And we can observe as well commitments taken by key players like Google or Microsoft moving towards 24/7 green power supply by 2030. So it makes a lot of sense to focus on this topic, and especially in the region, in the continuity, I will say, of the strategy of the business unit as presented by Thomas, which highlighted this topic as well. When it comes to cooling, it's a bit the same, I would say. Where does it make more sense to focus our research work more than in tropical countries like in Singapore? I mean, focusing on this topic makes a lot of sense here. And so we will investigate the entire cooling value chain for different applications, and mainly cooling technologies for building and vertical farming use. I will say that we will focus first on the buildings, and vertical farming applications will probably come later, according to the exercise of the roadmap we've been through with the local ecosystem during the first semester of the year. It seems that vertical farming, needs to be a bit more mature. As far as we see it from now, but we will still be active on the topic. And so we'll investigate, for instance, chiller optimization solutions, predictive maintenance solution, and new cooling solutions based on sky cooling technology, for instance, like the one we target to develop with JTC. I think this presentation is coming to an end. So I think we've got a bit of time for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Viosel and Dr. Peng. May we invite you to stay on for the panel discussion. We are pleased to invite Mr. Anurag Chatterjee, Regional Business Development Manager from Asia Pacific, Energy and Renewables Advisory, DNVGL Energy, who will be moderating this session. For those who would like to pose a question to our speakers, please use the question tab on the SIEW virtual platform. I would like to hand over the time to Anurag.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Xiaoyang, for the wonderful presentation. And I'm sure everyone in the audience was really pleased to see some of the accolades ENGIE presented. For instance, the 27 gigawatt of installed capacity that you have, and #1 power producer in Singapore, and also the key purpose of ENGIE, which is clearly to accelerate in this whole energy transition, which pretty much sits with DNVGL's energy transition outlook, where we believe that we're all doing what we have been doing for the last decade is fine, but we all need to step it up a notch. And that's where we believe the purpose that ENGIE is driving in terms of accelerating this whole transition. It is great. Now, moving towards the first question, we gather that there's no really one solution or no silver bullet that can address the whole sustainability solution that ENGIE is driving towards. We know that investment in infrastructure is required, new technologies is required, but of course, with all these two, R&D remains the key focus, and there's a true epicenter of this whole energy transition. So perhaps a question to you, Dr. Xiaoyang. How do you think this whole R&D projects that you have set forward enables in this whole energy transition that we all are so eager to be part of and contribute?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, in my opinion, I think towards the energy transition is really about technologies, as well as the mindset of the knowledge level and acceptance level of the people. So by saying that, I mean, actually, if you're looking at the technologies that are available today,
which by that we demonstrated using this platform, the wind turbine, the solar PV, the hydrogen system, the technology is there. And you know, the next step is really to show to the people, to all the audiences, the industry, that the technology is ready. Let's think about how to make this technology available. And that's where, you know, R&D platform like REITSPO plays an important role, and it is to demonstrate in physical form all these technologies, to showcase that it actually works, and then to promote this idea that people could actually use it, and then, you know, move to the next phase into how to utilize it, how to make it economically viable, knowing that the technology is already there. So bridging the gap of, you know, knowledge difference is also a part of the journey that we are looking at for energy transition, and that's what we are trying to push right now.
Thank you, Xiaoyang. That brings a very interesting topic, a question also. In fact, two questions which came around that is if you were to look into a crystal ball and all the projects that you are currently doing or ongoing, which of these projects would you say offers the greatest potential in moving towards the carbon neutrality? If you had to pick your favorite.
It's a little bit difficult because you know that in Energy Lab Singapore, we are looking at a wide range of topics, different topics in smart grid, in energy efficiency, in industry, in smart cities, new gases. And now we are looking at, you know, cooling, we are looking at data center. So all these topics are very interesting, and they all contribute to the same, you know, energy transition or reduce carbon, you know, in a general way. For me, since I'm more looking at the project, my personal favorite, I would say, is really looking at, you know, how we demonstrated the food chain of hydrogen on site. So the hydrogen food chain that we are pushing is really, I would say it's one of the, it's the first case that I have known of in this region that we can demonstrate from the beginning, which means the generation of the green hydrogen to storage, to utilization with electricity at the same time with mobility usage. And then by demonstrating that, we are also looking at, you know, finding out the performances of all these equipment in tropical condition to see whether it is really at the stage we can make great use of it. And of course, by utilizing this hydrogen ourselves, we are also looking at how we can, you know, push the boundaries to say, using the hydrogen P2P system to support the grid, how does it compare to a battery system? If we combine the battery system and the P2P, how it will look like. So all these technical, you know, questions and also projects that we are doing around the hydrogen there is probably most my favorite here.
Okay, nice. It's always good to bet on the winning horse, and I clearly see that you have picked your winner of the projects. So thank you for that. Lloyd, perhaps a question to you. You know, we heard throughout the NG's presentation, awareness and collaboration were the two key words that kept coming up in all the three presentations. Now, keeping these two words in mind, I want to hear your view on how does the current COVID-19 situation mark a turning point in how the public thinks about the climate change? Just your quick view on that.
We have a technical problem here, so Loic will use my camera.
Okay, no problem. We all understand.
Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, it's part of the game. But I could hear your question. So yeah, I would say, yeah, I mean, everybody is concerned by the COVID situation. It's part of our daily life today. And I would say it might be an accelerator towards the big change, because I think it brought awareness to people. I think it's been an opportunity in a way to step back and think about our daily behaviors, and I think at the end of the day, I think everybody agrees to say that without changing completely our life drastically, we could all together by changing small details on a daily basis, we could have a big impact on the fight against climate change. So yeah, I would say indeed, I'm not saying I'm not going to travel anymore. I'm not saying I don't want my colleagues and my team anymore, and I just want telecommuting all the time. But I think, yeah, by some adjustments, things can change, and it's important.
Well, I can't agree more, Loic. And I think one thing that has really happened because of the pandemic is really made us think to work more efficiently and how we can have the same impact by not being in the same location. Perhaps going back to the question on about the whole collaboration and bringing in the right technologies in your R&D innovation centers. How do you pick the partners or the right technology partners to be part of this whole R&D center that NG has set out to? How do you pick a winner?
That's a good question. I would say the exercise of the roadmap we've been through at the beginning of the year was part of the analysis. I would say of the analysis of the matching between the key topics we want to focus on and the key partners in the local ecosystem active on these same topics. And you follow the news, you interact with the different agencies, with all the local ecosystem. So yeah, it's definitely very important to develop our footprint and our network in Singapore and beyond. And that's the way it works. I mean, once again, when we speak about climate change, about big switch, it's impossible to do that alone, and it's very important to be together as much as possible to foster collaboration and indeed to choose the right one, at least the one which can complement our own skills.
Yep, and I think that's very important to have the same objective towards the end goal. No, so I think you phrase it quite well. And Loic, for the sake of we all like numbers. So if you had, could we get an insight on how much NG is really planning to invest in this whole R&D center?
How much NG wants to invest in the R&D center?
I mean, just some kind of figure so that we
some figures. I can give you some figures like NG invests today around 200 millions in research and innovation worldwide, and so depending on the topics of interest, depending on the thematic labs I've presented you, some of them are very important today according to the corporate, and so they push a bit more budget on this one, and yeah, I mean there are some millions coming to Singapore as well.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. And as audience, you've heard it from the lab itself. I guess my last question before we end the session, Loic, just to facilitate this whole arrangement. Hydrogen was a topic that was initiated in SIEW 2 years ago, which I attended. And during that time, it was a very controversial topic. There were a lot of questions raised about the technology. And it's great to see NG's role in creating this kind of awareness in a city like Singapore to provide the application of the green hydrogen and the fuel cells in the transportation segment. So I guess if I was to ask you, when do you think with the current technology and the current scale the hydrogen is working on, when do you think this will kind of really reach its realization if we were going in this space of the hydrogen demonstration and the reliability of this technology? When do you think we can really see it make a real impact?
Yeah, we speak when we speak about hydrogen, we speak about mid to long term game changing. So we speak at least about 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But it depends on us once again. So that's why we push this topic on the platform, on the R&D testing platform at Simacao landfill. Over there, we've got the full chain, the full hydrogen chain, including production, storage, mobility. So we can address all these topics together. And the idea is really to accelerate the work, cutting down the cost as soon as possible to make it happen and deploy all these technologies at a larger scale as soon as possible.
But indeed, hydrogen is a key topic globally, I would say, for NG Group. We believe in the future, in a 100% green future energy market, and believe that hydrogen will play a key role in it to decarbonize sectors like industry, mobility, and we need to push in research in this topic, definitely.
Yep. Thank you, Loic. That brings us end of this session, and thank you for putting Singapore on the map with this R&D center. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, speakers. We will now start the session on strengthening energy resilience through innovation and cooperation, featuring regulators from Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong, China. I'll now hand over the time to Anurag.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone. And good afternoon to this session. Welcome, Mr. Niam, CEO, EMA. Welcome to Mr. Abdul Razib bin Dawood, CEO, Energy Commission, Malaysia. And welcome, Mr. Eric Pang, Director of Electrical and Mechanical Service Department, Hong Kong, SAR. In this session, you would see that we are all committed towards reduction of the carbon emission that we have in the ecosystem now, but it's very, very evident that we can't do it alone. And the MOU that we will be discussing among the three governments here will be a sheer example of how Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong have started this journey, and how we all can take cue from this kind of MOU discussion to take this transition faster. So over to you, Mr. Niam.
Good afternoon from Singapore. I'm delighted to be here with Mr. Abdul Razib bin Dawood from the Energy Commission, Malaysia, and Mr. Eric Pang from the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department, the Government of Hong Kong, SAR. To begin, I have two important announcements to make. First, the Energy Market Authority of Singapore and the Energy Commission Malaysia signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Energy Cooperation this morning. Second, after the Energy Insights this afternoon, EMA will also be signing an MOU with the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department of Hong Kong. Now, these MOUs will institutionalize exchanges with our counterparts in Malaysia and Hong Kong and deepen cooperation in energy regulation and capacity building. Given the challenges faced by the energy sector in 2020, this enhanced cooperation in Malaysia and Hong Kong is timely and useful for all parties. COVID-19 has brought about severe disruption to the global economy and long-term challenges for energy systems. We have witnessed shocks to energy demand and supply, a steep decline in upstream investments, and uncertainty over our collective sustainable energy goals. The crisis has forced us to rethink, retool, and reinvent. Energy regulators in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong have introduced innovative plans to prepare our energy systems and markets for similar disruptions in the future. In Singapore, our policy responses to COVID-19 focus on three key aspects. First, ensuring the operational readiness of our electricity and gas licensees. Second, ensuring the availability of manpower for critical operations. And thirdly, providing targeted financial support to both utilities and consumers. The availability of critical spares and fuel supplies is critical, given that Singapore imports all our fuels. In fact, 95% of our power generation is gas-fired. So global and oil and gas supply chains are absolutely critical to Singapore. On the manpower front, business continuity plans were introduced to ensure adequate manpower in the energy sector. And this included special arrangements for skilled officers to carry out inspection and maintenance works. Another key aspect was increased digitalization of monitoring systems for key equipment and grid assets. Finally, the government took pains to safeguard consumer well-being. We provided tax deductions and utility bill offsets to reduce expenses incurred while working from home. Now, to better prepare ourselves for similar disruptions in the future, we'll continue to innovate and strengthen our energy systems. Our priorities lie in system reliability and resiliency. We'll continue to invest in R&D to enhance transmission and distribution planning, maintenance and monitoring, and asset renewal. Digitalization will also be increased through digital twins and online monitoring systems. Last but not least, cybersecurity remains a key priority underpinning the digitalization of critical infrastructure. For more resilient markets, EMA will be implementing a forward capacity market in 2021. Meanwhile, we will continue to pursue our Singapore energy story to advance innovations in renewables, low carbon technologies, and hydrogen and regional power grids. To allow us to better rethink, retool, and reinvent ourselves, international cooperation remains key, and SIEW is one good platform. The Energy Insights series was conceived some years ago to bring together like-minded stakeholders to share their energy perspectives and reports. With our enhanced cooperation in Malaysia and Hong Kong today, I'm delighted to welcome my counterparts, Abdul Razib bin Dawood of the Energy Commission and Eric Pang, Director of Electrical and Mechanical Services Department of Hong Kong, SIEW, to share their thoughts of how we can better enhance energy resilience and deepen cooperation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Niam. If I may ask Mr. Abdul Razib, CEO, Energy Commission Malaysia, to give us his opening remarks.
Thank you again, Mr. Niam, the CEO of EMA, Mr. Eric Pang, Director of Electrical Mechanical Service Department, Hong Kong, and the moderator, Mr. Anurag. I would like to share a story, what happened during the lockdown of COVID-19. When we had this lockdown for a few weeks, the sudden demands dropped. It's about 60%. So as government easing up the lockdown, the demands recovered. As of today, I can share with you the demand have recovered. It's about 93% pre-COVID-19 level. So luckily, I think the recovery has been a V-shaped recovery. So that was happened during the lockdown on the demands of electricity in Peninsular Malaysia. On the supply side, we have excess capacity. So what we did was managing the reserve capacity. And one of the main challenges during the lockdown is we have excess of gas supply. So we were managing the low level of gas supply to power sector. So those on the demands and supply during the COVID-19. Right? On the social side, government of Malaysia generously have given to all electricity consumers a discount. The reason being because they were forced to stay at their home. So it is part of government's a caring or social initiative by giving a discount to the consumers, right? And what also we still experiencing of the project delay. We have a few big project, power plants project as well as transmission project. We also experiencing a project delay due to the restriction traveling, especially cross-border traveling. On the operation side, we also facing these challenges of making sure all the staff, operators and maintenance staff to be in the condition of safe to operate across the value chains. So all in all, so the story has been very good. So in terms of securing the supply of electricity to the country, we have not faced any issues of supplies and demands. But what we are hoping that we could recover back the demand prior to the COVID-19. With that, I wanted to start the story on the COVID-19, what we have experienced so far. But in terms of resilience, of course, learning from these pandemics, so we realized that this infrastructure is very important, especially during this the health crisis. So we take cognizance of the lesson learned from these lockdowns and during this health crisis. Whatever we do, the system must be secure and stable. So I would like to stop here before we continue for the next question. I pass back to Mr. Anurag, the moderator here.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul, and thank you for sharing the story. And I'm sure every one of us could relate to that in some point or the other. Now, if I could invite Mr. Eric Pang, Director, Electrical and Mechanical Service Department, Hong Kong SAR, to present your opening remarks, please.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ngam, Mr. Abdul Rajib, Mr. Anurag, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure speaking at this online Singapore International Energy Week 2020. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Ngam and the Energy Market Authority for convening this renowned annual Energy Summit in the time of COVID-19. I'm also looking forward eagerly to the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding later today with the EMA. The MOU deepens our partnership on sharing of knowledge and experience in energy-related area in shaping a green and sustainable future. I hope that it can also be a stepping stone for us to expand our cooperations with other nearby countries. The COVID-19 pandemic present myriad of challenges to governments around the world. The Hong Kong government has proactively and swiftly rolled out a series of emergency measures for the prevention and control of the virus. Since the beginning of this year, the government has launched 3 rounds of anti-epidemic fund, totaling $36 billion to assist the industry and the publics affected by the epidemic and help enhance Hong Kong's anti-epidemic capabilities. Despite the fact that the full impact of the ongoing COVID-19 has yet to know, the epidemic not only threatens the life and safety of the citizens, but also has a significant impact on our economic development. Among the measures for the society to tide over the economic winter, the government has launched the Green Employment Scheme to create jobs in the realms of environmental protections. The scheme aimed at employing fresh graduates to work in areas related to environmental protection, ecological conservation, green energy and energy conservation, climate change and sustainable development. It provides job opportunity for graduates interested in environment-related fields to enter the industry under current difficult times, and to nurture and prepare talents to meet the needs on various environmental fronts and building an energy-resilient society in the post-COVID-19 epidemic. And our departments, the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department, has also created more than 1,200 jobs to assist in digitalization of government E&M assets. Our ultimate purpose is to migrate to an intelligent operation using artificial intelligence, not only for predictive maintenance, but also for energy-saving operations. And in doing so, driving the trade and the private sectors towards the application of such technology for green operation. The World Health Organization has advised that the world has a long way to go in tackling the COVID-19 epidemic, and the virus may coexist with the mankind for a long time. Social distancing during the pandemic has brought about new norms, such as working from home, e-commerce, e-learning, and e-shopping for us to coexist with the virus for some time. The new norms have created great opportunity for the innovation and technology sectors, such as this online SIEW 2020. The promotion of I&T is the key priority in Hong Kong government's long-term economic development strategy. In particular, the government will roll out the $25 million US Green Tech Fund by the end of this year, which is the latest funding specifically targeted at I&T on green tech for stimulating innovation and promoting the research and development and application of green technology, and for facilitating the community in advancing decarbonization and enhancing environmental protection. The priority themes of the fund include decarbonization, energy saving, green transport, and waste-to-energy technologies. The COVID-19 outbreak has immediately caused a tragic number of deaths, forcing people to adopt a new norm, resulting in economic hardship and the impacts are rippling across the world. The whole mankind is eagerly awaiting the vaccines to come. Wow, the same descriptions are also applicable to another global crisis, the climate change. While it is not as immediate as COVID-19, its impact will be even worse, and there is no vaccine to cure it. We must therefore rely on the age-old adage, prevention is better than cure in dealing with the climate change. The Paris Agreement is the international collaboration for curing the climate change pandemic. The agreement aims at, among others, strengthening the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change through appropriate financial flows, a new technology framework, and an enhanced capacity building framework. With our vigorous efforts in promoting energy efficiency and conservation, Hong Kong's energy demand per GDP has reduced by about 32% from 2005 to 2018. Being an active member in the APEC, we are committed to become a low-carbon city and look forward to collaborating with many more members to build a sustainable future. Leaving no one behind is one of the major concerns reflected in the 2030 agendas for sustainable development. Combating COVID-19 and climate change require joint ventures, such as the travel bubbles between Singapore and Hong Kong has showcased. To restart our economy post-COVID-19 and to combat climate change, we need international cooperation, innovation and technology to create a safe, healthy, clean, green, and more resilient low-carbon future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eric Pang, for the wonderful remarks. And it's really great to see that job creation, skills upgrading, and being for future ready is very, very crucial and one of the key objectives of this MOU. So thank you for that. Perhaps if I can just bring you guys to our next session on the panel. Maybe I could start with you, Mr. Abdul. What are we heard about some of the challenges that you faced and some of the challenges that the local community was facing. What would you say are your key priorities going forward if you were to reflect on this MOU, maybe in the next 100 days?
I think this morning we have signed MOU with EMA, with Energy Commission of Malaysia. As maybe some of you already aware, our power system network already been connected since 1983, and we also have a gas pipeline connected between Malaysia and Singapore. So we've been connected all this while. So we've been cooperating with each other for all this while. So what the significance of this MOU, we are enhancing our collaborations and our cooperation between two authorities or regulatory bodies. So immediately within this 100 days, we're going to arrange working visits. If travel permits, we will visit our colleague in Singapore in MA. We can start planning some exchange knowledge or exchange information. And as you already aware, EMA made an announcement last week. So they are looking at importing hundreds megawatts for a trial period within the next year or two. So one of the agenda we want to discuss is regarding that energy export from Malaysia, or you can say energy imports to Singapore. And there are other things that we are, particular Malaysia, interested to share. Not only electricity, we also want to share our natural gas industry together with EMA. As you also aware, we also have some plan toward future deregulations or market liberalizations in Malaysia. As you are well aware that Singapore is well in advance in terms of industry, markets, economy. And there are other things that we could share with Singapore. We have a lot of experience in big solar farms, projects and operations. And we also have a good data and experience in decentralized generations in our system. Perhaps we could share with our colleague in the EMA. And there are other things that we look forward to learn from Singapore in terms of digitalization. So I have spoken all these 3Ds in, and the other Ds is the decarbonization. We have a target to achieve by 2025 of 20% of renewable energy in our capacity mix. We have many programs like feed-in tariff, large-scale solar, net energy metering, self-consumption, renewable energy, embedded renewable energy, and so on and so forth. We're very confident that we can achieve those targets within this 4 years' time. Okay. And also, not to forget this, Singapore and Malaysia are part of the 10 ASEAN countries. Malaysia, Thailand, and Laos have started this Laos, Thailand, Malaysia multilateral energy trading 3 years ago. We are really looking forward to get Singapore on board in this multilateral power trading within ASEAN. So there are a lot of things that we can discuss and share our experience and vice versa with EMA. So I really looking forward to meet Mr. Ngiam and his colleague when time and also travel permit us to visit them in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul, and I'm sure we are all eagerly waiting for the travel to come back to normal, so we can have the usual business interaction and the deals that can be easily talked about and signed across the table. So I completely understand where you're coming from, and it's great to see Malaysia having some. I would say a clear roadmap towards achieving the objectives set out in this MOU. So thank you for that. Over to you, Mr. Pang. Perhaps the same question. In your next 100 days, what would be your key priorities which you will undertake based on the MOU that is now being signed between Singapore and Hong Kong?
Well, we are very glad to have the memorandums of understanding in place so that we can have established ways to exchange with our working partners. We target on the same things in both Hong Kong and in Singapore. I think the first things that we would like to share is about the ways to decarbonize our communities. That is a very important agenda. According to the Paris Agreement, we have to do a lot, and it is very challenging indeed. Let me share with you our ways to decarbonize Hong Kong. We set the target and we set the timeline for it. And then we have some regulatory measures. We have the laws in place, for example, about building energy efficiency and then about the energy labels and some things like this in place. We also motivate the trades by being the role models in a lot of areas, such as in solar energy. We roll out the solar harvest scheme and also the Green School 2.0 scheme to sponsors the schools to adopt the solar lightings and also to adopt energy efficiency measures such as LED lightings, the measurements, the real-time measurements of the electricity consumption, etc. We also have funding in place to encourage the government department to adopt renewable energy, solar lightings, and also wind energy, and also waste to energy, etc. We have, for the private sectors, we have schemes to incentivize them, such as we have the fee scheme, which give a very generous payment of about $5 Hong Kong for each kilowatt hour of electricity generated by solar lighting. We have the green building certification. We have the I&T fund in place. We have the green tech fund in place that just mentioned. We have the tax deduction, etc. We also have the publicities programs to educate and energize the communities towards decarbonization. And for the infrastructure, we work with the power company so that they will switch to the LNG for electricity generations. And the government department also installed the district cooling systems for the Kai Tak area, for the Dongchong area, for the Hong Shui Kiu area, the Kutong North area, etc. Many of them are in the pipeline. These are some of the major decarbonization measures that is being adopted in Hong Kong. And when we hope that through this memorandum of understanding, we could share our experience and learn, that is both important, learn more from the Singapore counterparts. I think because the Singapore and Hong Kong are really similar in the geographical layout, in our population, in our economy, etc., we can have a lot to learn. And two key aspects to learn is the first one is about the expertise. For example, how to train up our staff and train up our colleagues and the trades to decarbonize our society. The second thing is that I changed the technical know-how, the I&T results and our R&D research and development results, and that are the areas that we will look for. This is what we hope could learn more from our international collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pang, and it's great to get to see a clear strategy ahead amidst this great pandemic that we face. So thank you again for your insights, and we all believe that we should all learn from each other so we don't repeat the same mistakes. So thank you for that, Mr. Abdul. If I was to reflect upon some of the challenges and the priority that you mentioned, what role does the international cooperation play in creating, creating a low carbon future between Singapore and Malaysia? How does the international community and cooperation impact, or is it something really atypical of Asia?
Okay, thank you for the question. We a party to COP21. We are one of the signatories of a Paris Agreement. If you look at the detail, 45% emission and intensity reduction from the base of 2005 to be achieved by 2030. There are terms that are unconditional. There are terms that are conditional upon. If I'm not mistaken, 30% is unconditional and 50% is conditional upon some kind of assistance from international community in terms of technology, transfer, financing, and I can't remember the other one, but we really hope that 50% that are conditional upon those elements, we hope to receive some kind of assistance from the international community. I'll give you one example. Under Green Climate Fund, GCF, we have partnered with Carbon Trust organization from London. So we have received those assistance, but we also would like to receive some kind of assistance in terms of capacity building, especially technology, innovation, etc., etc. Yeah. So those are the areas that perhaps international community can help Malaysia to achieve the target of COP21 by 2030. It's not only a financial assistance, but the capacity building, the technology transfer, and those innovation from most advanced country. I'll give you an example. We're really interested to embark on this battery energy storage system. So we plan to launch some kind of a trial or pilot project on battery energy storage system in our network, in our power system network. So we would like to receive, or we welcome any assistance from international community in terms of how we specify, how we commercialize those initiatives, battery energy storage system. Yeah. So there are other things. We are facing challenges on, decentralization. You're looking at embedded, small embedded generation in our distribution network. So those are the areas that we, because of this renewable energy comes within these ambits of embedded generation, there are technical challenges of maintaining stable and secure system. So we look forward for any technical international assistance in terms of managing those issues such as intermittency and variability of the embedded generation. I think that's all I can say for now. But Alice,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul, and I'm sure Mr. Niam was taking his notes in all the different help that you have put up for. So over to you, Mr. Niam. We looked in your presentation that 95% of Singapore's power generation is gas-fired. Now, is there any plan for Singapore to expand or work on an energy mix based on the MOU?
Thank you, Anuraj, for the question. Well, it's true that 95% of our fuel mix is based on natural gas. And we put in quite a fair bit of effort in terms of improving energy security on that front. So in terms of diversifying sources, in terms of bringing in more LNG importers, that's what we're trying to do. But at the same time, we are moving on to more solar as well. So we achieved our solar target of 350 megawatt peak in 2020. And we have a target of 2 gigawatt peak, at least 2 gigawatt peak by 2030. So that's quite a fair bit of solar that we plan to bring into the system. That's one of those areas which we plan to learn a lot more from Malaysia on, from the large-scale solar programs, which many times bigger than our solar programs, but really how we integrate renewables into our grids, ensuring reliability and stability of the systems, even as we do that. I also look forward to learning a lot more from Hong Kong as well, in terms of the solar programs that you have and how you've managed to integrate the large amounts of solar from all your different types of solar harvest programs and schemes, and to bring that into the system without affecting reliability. On Singapore's front, as Mr. Razib mentioned as well, we are also looking at more imports from regional power grids. And given the close connections and interactions that we have with Malaysia, really our closest neighbor, with existing interconnections for both electricity and gas as well, it's absolutely natural that we'll work with our good friends up in Malaysia on that front. And again, that's one thing that we hope would further diversify our energy sources in Singapore. Something that we hope to learn from Malaysia as well, because Malaysia has been trading electricity with Thailand as well, and with Laos as well. And so that's something that we hope to further develop with Malaysia under our MOU in terms of our collaborations. I think besides the fuel sources that we're talking about, we are also looking at really reducing energy consumption. And to that end, we hope to learn more from Hong Kong, particularly on all its initiatives in terms of improving energy efficiency. I heard from Mr. Pang as well on how it's improved infrastructure with district cooling systems. That's something that we are certainly very keen to learn from Hong Kong on, and how we can further strengthen our market mechanisms to enable companies, the private sector, and the public sector to become more energy efficient going forward. Likewise, for the development of manpower and expertise, I think I look forward to working with both Malaysia and Hong Kong on this front. Really how we train our workers, particularly the skilled workers that are required for the power and energy sector, and how can we prepare them for the future, for new technologies such as solar, hydrogen, carbon capture, that will become a part of our energy systems going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ngiam, and thank you, distinguished speakers, for shedding your views and remarks and clearly defining the way forward and marking this as a clear milestone for the other APEC members to follow suit. So thank you again for your time, and look forward to a discussion further in the Energy Insights. Thank you so much.
A big thank you to all our panelists for the insightful discussion. For our next segment, we would like to invite Mr. Simon Sharp from the UK COP26 office for his presentation. Mr. Sharp, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. If it's all right, I think I'm not going to use my slides. I'm just going to talk. So if you want to just move those back to the background, that might be easier. It's been a real pleasure hearing the speakers just now on the panel, and it really reinforces the sense I have of how much willingness there is to cooperate internationally on climate change. We, as the UK, have taken on the task of acting as presidency of COP26, the international talks on climate change, next year. And of course, they were supposed to be held this year, round about now. And of course, we had to postpone by about a year because of what was happening with the pandemic. And so many things have been pushed back. And yet what we've found over the last year is that there remains enormous willingness all over the world to continue confronting climate change, making progress on low carbon transitions at the same time as dealing with the public health crisis and helping our economies recover. We've felt great goodwill from governments, business, civil society all over the world, and we're very grateful for that. And we hope to use the longer time that we have now as presidency of these talks to make even more progress. So the context, of course, is quite tough. That globally we've been working together on climate change, I think you can say, for at least 40 years, since the first World Climate Change Conference in Geneva in 1979. And despite all of that, despite the many great examples of progress there have been, we're in a situation where global emissions are still going up structurally, despite a blip over COVID. And in many ways, our resilience as a global community, as an economy, as an ecosystem is going down. And we have to change those two things around. We need emissions going down and resilience going up. And so we need a great acceleration of structural change in the global economy. Now, when we think about how do we help, what can our contribution be as presidency, then we're thinking in terms of three kinds of role or three sorts of outcomes that we can get from COP26. The first, of course, is the formal negotiations, and we hope that we can conclude a fair and balanced agreement that further strengthens the international consensus for action on climate change. The second is nationally determined contributions. In the Paris Agreement, countries all agreed that they would not just make one contribution and then stick with it, but they would strengthen these over time. And we're seeing an incredible movement right now towards consensus that the most important national commitment you can make is to net zero emissions. We all agreed we would aim for net zero global emissions in the Paris Agreement, and now countries are translating that into their own national targets. The UK committed to net zero by 2050 back last year. The European Union is moving towards the same goal. Japan has just in the last few days made the same commitment, and China has said it's aiming for carbon neutrality by 2060. That's an incredible forward movement, and I'm sure the pace of that is only going to pick up. And on the 12th of December this year, our Prime Minister, together with the UN Secretary General, will be inviting world leaders to come to a summit where they will set out even stronger commitments. The invitation is, if you have a stronger commitment on either emissions reduction or adaptation or finance, you can come and have a platform, be part of that summit and tell the world. So, but the third part, and the one I want to speak a little bit more about, is what we're calling our campaigns for COP26. And these are all about stronger international collaboration on the practical challenges of responding to climate change in the sorts of areas that Mr. Abdul and others were just talking about. And we've chosen 5 areas that we're taking on. These are energy, nature, transport, finance, and adaptation and resilience. And each of these is very different, but the commonality is that they require systemic change in the global economy, moving to in the energy system, moving from coal to clean power. In the transport sector, especially road transport, moving from petrol and diesel cars to electric and other zero emission vehicles. In adaptation and resilience, making all kinds of human systems more resilient, sharing expertise and increasing the flows of finance for that. In nature, reducing the destruction of ecosystems, especially forests, and transforming our agriculture so that it regenerates ecosystems instead of destroying them. And in finance, changing the way financial decisions are made through all sectors of the economy so that they take us towards the Paris goals. Each of these requires deep, fundamental, rapid change in the global economy, and we can do that more quickly, more easily, and with greater economic benefits if we move together. And the energy sector is a very good example of that, for all the kinds of reasons we've just been hearing. We have a real challenge here. We've got about 2,000 gigawatts of coal globally, and that's much more than we want to start with. And on top of that, we have plans globally to build about a further 500 gigawatts of coal. And this is, of course, the worst thing that you can possibly do for climate change, is build a new coal power station. So we have to move away from that. We have to quickly reduce existing coal and cancel plans for new coal. But the opportunity that we're seeing is huge. As everybody knows, the cost of clean power is dropping incredibly quickly. And it's now cheaper than coal and gas in nearly all countries in the world. At the same time as that cost coming down, we're seeing a massive increase in deployment. And it's worth taking a step back and realizing how much faster that deployment is than was expected. Back in 2006, the IEA's central scenario for solar PV deployment in 2020 was around 50 gigawatts. And right now, globally, we have something like 600 gigawatts deployed, more than 10 times as much. So just think about that. Over 14 years, we got it wrong by an order of magnitude. We've been going more than 10 times faster than we expected. That's a huge opportunity. At the same time as the cheaper energy, we've got cleaner air, and we've got 3 times as many jobs being created for every dollar spent on renewable energy as we have on fossil fuels, according to McKinsey. So the challenge is to accelerate this, and the International Energy Agency estimates that the power sector transition needs to move about 4 times faster than it is now to be online for the Paris goals. That sounds impossible, but it's not impossible because we're on an S-curve of technology transition, and we're at the point where the upward slope is increasing. So acceleration is absolutely possible. And just in the last few days, you see more evidence of that. You see the Japanese Prime Minister coming out saying we must fundamentally change our reliance on coal power. And just the Philippines yesterday announcing a moratorium on new coal. These are all going with the trend and accelerating the trend. So for our COP26 energy transition campaign, we want to continue growing the coalition of countries committed to phasing out coal power. That's the Powering Past Coal Alliance. This is very much a group of countries showing leadership in this transition, and it now covers about 30% of the coal plants in the OECD countries. So it's a very serious commitment, and it's undoubtedly changing investor expectations and policy expectations globally. But on top of that, we really want to strengthen international assistance for scaling up clean power. We want to make sure that every country that might be considering a new coal plant can access a clean energy investment alternative that is more attractive. And we know there's a huge amount of international cooperation in this sector already happening. The UK alone over the last 5 years spent about £2 billion on technical assistance and finance in the power sector in other countries. Many other countries have been active as donors too. So have the expert organizations like the International Energy Agency, IRENA, Sustainable Energy for All, and so have the multilateral development banks. What we are going to try to do over the course of the next year and a bit to COP is to bring together these different actors, the energy ministers, the multilateral development banks, the expert agencies, as well as business and civil society experts, and have a very serious conversation with each other and with energy ministers about what would it really take to go faster? How can we provide a higher quality of assistance and collaboration? And how can we all make stronger commitments to cut back on coal power and scale up clean power, working together? As well as looking at those new power investments, we also want to look at the existing stock of coal, and especially looking at those parts of the world, those communities that are most reliant on coal for jobs and provincial revenues and local economic viability, recognizing that that is not a technical challenge about power sector reform, it's a socio-economic challenge. And looking at how can we really grasp that nettle and provide better support between each other for a just transition away from coal. So that's what we're going to try and do. Of course, we're informed by our own experience in the UK, which is that policy plays an absolutely central role. That if you get the policies right, then the investment will flow and the costs will come down and the transition begins to gather its own momentum. And a great example of this is offshore wind. Just less than a decade ago, many of the economists, including The Economist magazine and prominent economists in the UK, were saying offshore wind is a terrible idea. It's the most expensive clean technology known to man, they were saying, and it was generating at about £140 a megawatt hour. But in the last decade, we've seen the cost of offshore wind drop by more than 2/3. And it's now at a level where it's not only cheaper than coal, it's cheaper than gas. And the new fixed price contracts that we've signed recently, we expect when they come into force in a few years' time, not to be subsidizing offshore wind, but actually to be earning revenue for the government at the same time. And that's happened because we put in place contracts that stabilized revenues, that gave certainty to investment, and took other measures like the capacity market that supported the integration of renewables into the grid. So we've all faced common challenges. The ones the other speakers were talking about, renewables integration, looking at storage, grid stability, those are the ones we're all grappling with. But we think if we continue to exchange the best practice between us, take the serious policy steps, we can mobilize large amounts of investment, see rapid cost reductions, and all have these transitions that are growing jobs as well as reducing emissions. So we're really pleased to be able to say that we already have quite strong cooperation with countries in the ASEAN region. We have a 15 million low carbon energy program, which is supporting green finance and energy transitions in Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, and the Philippines. To give a few examples of what that's doing, in Indonesia, that's supporting Indonesia to harness its solar power, wind, and other clean technologies. In the Philippines, we've helped the government set up a market for renewable energy. And in Myanmar, we're working with the Ministry of Electricity to attract international finance, developing standards for solar and wind energy. And just last month.
Sorry, Simon. Maybe I'd like to just interrupt because we are running a bit over time. So apologize for cutting short. But I think you have addressed a few interesting points in your early presentation. We touched upon the 4 different campaigns which is running under the UK COP26. The one is energy transition, the transport, the nature-based solutions, and adaptation resilience. And it's really important that we take these campaigns and make it very relevant to APAC market, which is very dynamic. And in some of the markets that you mentioned, access to electricity is absolutely critical. And it's great to see that one of the objectives is to provide that. And it's really heartwarming to see such initiatives being carried out under this campaign. But to me personally, the most important campaign for me is the transportation, because people like you, people like me, we spend a lot of time on road, and so how much are the technologies like EV, autonomous vehicles, fuel cells, which we heard from NG earlier, Toyota, how are these kind of linked to the whole energy transition? Because I don't see the end yet. Do you, as part of the whole COP26?
Well, thank you for giving me the chance to say something about transport, because in many ways that's also my favorite campaign. I mean, nice. I think there's an incredible opportunity for countries to work together to accelerate the transition first of all, in road transport. We're just like in the power sector, this is going faster than expected. You look at all of the expert projections, how do those projections change over time? They only change in one direction, and it's up. Bloomberg New Energy Finance, the most optimistic people, and they raised their estimate for EV market share in 2040 by about 20 percentage points over a course of 3 years. So that is moving very quickly. What's interesting for me is that cars are a global market, a $2 trillion global market sold across borders. And so if you set tough standards in some big economies, you shift manufacturers' investment decisions, not only in your own market, but all over the world. And we've seen the European Union having that effect in the past. Now, you only need a small number of countries cooperating to shift the entire global market. EU, China, California, that's 3 jurisdictions together account for over half of global car sales. Or if you take the G7 countries plus China, India, Brazil, you've got over 3/4. Now, if they agree to align their regulatory trajectories towards, say, 100% of new car sales being zero emission by 2040 or earlier, then they could actually double the pace of that global transition, be in line with Paris. Now, in terms of the opportunities for that to spill over into other sectors, I mean, the most obvious one is this is where batteries get scaled up. Batteries get scaled up in cars in vastly greater quantities than they do anywhere else. And that will bring their costs down, just like power and wind and solar. They're on that straight line on the log-log graph between cumulative production and cost. And so that will give us cheaper batteries that we can then all use for grid stability throughout the power sector. The other one, you mentioned fuel cells, and I think this is a really interesting possibility, which is that we know we need hydrogen in many sectors, many of the hard to decarbonize parts of the economy. One of the first sectors where we may be able to scale up those technologies is quite likely to be heavy goods vehicles, where it looks like one of the most promising options. So again, if we work together to do that, get some hydrogen trucks onto the road, begin scaling that up, that will help us bring down the costs of fuel cells. And also, if we're using electrolysis to produce green hydrogen, bring down the cost of electrolyzers too, and help us bring hydrogen to the rest of the economy. So I think that's a huge opportunity. And so it's it's a big priority for us.
And there's no surprise. Again, hydrogen has been a technology that's very much in question right now, and it's good to see many organizations and many of the speakers that I was speaking to in session. They are doing what they can do to create and build more awareness towards the technology, which could be the real key to unlock the whole potential that we are all going for. Perhaps maybe I would take a question from the audience. Simon, the question here says, how can green and sustainable financing and ESG alleviate the issue of fossil fuel standard assets in the energy transition? I know you touched upon earlier, it would be absolutely crime to have any kind of new coal plants, but how do we really pull the plug and tell them to stop? How is that can we manage with this initiative? If you can briefly talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of coal plants have international finance of one form or another, and banks, and also, well, sometimes those are state-owned banks, sometimes they're private banks, but they have a significant amount of influence in determining how easy it is to access capital for new coal plants and for clean power, and the cost of that capital. And we are seeing now a growing number of banks saying that they will not finance any new coal. That's really significant. And I think the most important thing to do is to carry on growing that number and just make it clear that, as the questioner said, coal is going to be a stranded asset. To give one example of that, in the US over recent years, we've seen coal plants closing more quickly under President Trump than they closed under President Obama, despite the fact that Trump is trying to keep them open. So really, it's increasingly going to be cheaper to install new solar and wind than it is to keep on running existing coal. Forget about building a new one, just running an existing one is going to be more expensive. So there's no doubt that stranding is coming. And I think sometimes in green finance, there's a risk that you can get bogged down in long discussions about principles and standards. And I think it's really important to just take a sector-specific view and understand what's the transition happening here, which assets are definitely not wanted anymore, and which are the ones we're moving towards, and then stop financing the ones we don't want. It's really a lot simpler than it's often made to sound.
I agree, but someone's going to do it, Simon. It's not easy, and I'm glad that the UK and Italy have taken the lead in this whole initiative, because it's always good to start somewhere. So thank you for your wonderful insights, and thank you for addressing some of the questions which were posed to you. I know it was short notice, but thank you so much for coming in. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. Our last presenter is Dr. Sama Bilbao Yi Leon, Director General, World Nuclear Association. Dr. Bilbao Yi Leon, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is my absolute pleasure to join you today for this event. I actually think it's quite fortunate that I was able to speak after the previous speaker, Mr. Sharp, because I think that what I'm going to present is it dovetails very well to his remarks. So I am representing, if we go to the next slide, I am going to tell you a little bit about the role that nuclear energy is currently having in the overall electricity mix, and then maybe I'm going to move forward towards what is it that nuclear energy can do in the future. So this information is based on some of our most recent publications that I'm showing here in this slide. And again, just remember that the World Nuclear Association is an international organization that represents more than 182 organizations from the entire global nuclear industry in more than 43 countries. So we present very global, very multinational, very international views. So let's go to the next slide, where we can see the current situation of nuclear in the world, but also something that I think is quite sobering. I always like to put things in perspective. If you look to the left side of your screen, you see bars that show you that in the year 2000, about 36% of the electricity supply globally was produced with low carbon energy sources. Now, if you look at 2017, you will realize that the percentage of low carbon energy sources is exactly the same, 36% more or less. So I think that you will agree with me that that is not good news. It means that whatever it is that we think we are doing is not helping, it's not moving forward. Again, this is 2017 numbers, but if you look at 2019 numbers, they are not very different. Despite the enormous investment that we have done in variable renewable energy sources, we still are not making a dent. And in that context, I also like to normally emphasize that among the low carbon energy sources, nuclear is currently the second largest source of low carbon electricity generation worldwide. So let's go to the next slide, when we can see how is nuclear energy performing currently. In 2019, the nuclear generation total actually increased by almost 100 terawatt hours. And this was done despite the fact that the global nuclear capacity did decrease by 5 gigawatts. So that's really not going in the right direction as far as building new nuclear or maintaining the existing fleet. But despite that, we managed to maintain the overall generation. So you also, the overall capacity factor was above 80%, which I will present you in a couple of minutes. And the good news is we had 6 new reactors that were connected to the grid, 4 large reactors, two in China, 1 in Russia, and 1 in South Korea. And then we also connected for the first time 2 small modular reactors that were particularly fit for purpose in Pevek in northeast Russia. So if we go to the next slide, you will see that what has been the electricity generation and the capacity since 2017. So here you see several things, how there was a very large growth in the 70s and 80s, and then it stabilized during the 90s. We saw a very sharp decline around 2012, due in part to the phase out in Germany and also the Japanese outages, but you are seeing how the production is continuing to grow. So there are maybe two things that I'd like to highlight here. Number one is to show how nuclear capacity can grow very quickly, as it did in the 70s and 80s. So this to give us hope that in this time where we really need to increase very quickly the generation that comes from low carbon energy sources, nuclear is one of the options that we can use. Now, if we go to the next slide, we kind of are going to zoom into the nuclear generation in Asia. And you can see how Asia has been a very good success story as far as the growth for nuclear. You see how, of course, Japan led the way at the beginning of the 70s, 80s, but then also Korea and most recently China have really increased enormously the nuclear generation and the deployment of this technology in Asia. I think it's important to notice that in recent times we have countries such as Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, and Bangladesh that are starting new nuclear energy programs. They are currently building new nuclear power plants. And then there are also a few newcomer countries that I would say, such as Philippines, Uzbekistan, perhaps others that are seriously considering nuclear, so that there's also another option. So let's move forward to the next slide, where very quickly you saw what I illustrated earlier. In the next slide, please. That the overall capacity factors in all nuclear reactors in the global fleet are very high. I mentioned earlier that we had an average of about above 80%. So that is quite significant. And this is also very significant if we look at the next slide, in which we are looking at the capacity factor through regardless of the age of the different reactors. This tells you that nuclear reactors are operating very well regardless of their age. So obviously the brand new nuclear reactors that are being deployed in recent years are having very excellent high capacity factors, but older nuclear units that have been operated for 30, 40, even 50 years are also performing really, really well. So this is quite important because, as I will show you in a second, we really are going to need to take full advantage of the existing fleet of nuclear power plants in order to have dovetailing into the new generation of nuclear power plants. So let's go to the next slide, where I'm trying to show you that, so I just show you what nuclear power is currently doing, but this next slide shows you what are the expectations on nuclear energy moving forward. So we present you in this slide several scenarios, several forecasts from different organizations, the International Panel on Climate Change, the International Energy Agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency. And if you look at these forecasts, in order to meet the goals that we have set for ourselves regarding climate change in the Paris Agreement, and just as importantly, if we are trying to achieve the sustainable development goals that will ensure the balance and equal quality of life for all humans everywhere in the world, we are really going to require that some amount of increase in nuclear power is included in the global energy mix. So you see that some of these scenarios actually require a huge increase in the number of nuclear units that need to be deployed. So let's go to the nuclear, the next slide, in which I mean, basically I'm looking forward in the role that nuclear will take as we think, and what are the transition energy plans, and how we are going to use any economic incentives that many governments are considering in order to get out of this COVID crisis. I don't have to tell you that this global coronavirus pandemic has had profound impacts on our societies and has had a huge economic impact. So obviously all countries in the world are looking very carefully what are the appropriate policy responses that are going to provide the opportunity to build a genuinely sustainable world. So I think that I like to look at this near-term future as an opportunity, because as we take advantage of these economic incentives, there is an opportunity to deploy in a cost-effective manner low carbon, resilient and affordable energy infrastructure. And when I say energy and electricity, and this is important, so we think that really investments in nuclear energy will also help strengthen the overall energy security and can definitely contribute to the overall energy supply, including low carbon heat and hydrogen, that of course are going to help decarbonize other sectors of the economy beyond electricity. So if we go to the next slide, we see what is it that we need in order to achieve electricity and energy security. And this is going to need a long-term strategy that requires long-term planning at the national and international levels. So there are three dimensions to a resilient electricity system that are quite important. Number one, obviously, there is the physical availability of generating capacity. This means, of course, that we really need to actually build the capacity. It needs to actually exist. But the second component to this resiliency relies on the importance of the contribution of this capacity to the smooth operation of the electricity system, even in the presence of sudden shifts on demand or changing meteorological conditions. Of course, this means that we really need to have dispatchable power that is available 24/7 in our system. And then finally, and just as importantly, is the importance that the contribution of this capacity needs to contribute to the stable economic behavior of the energy system. This means that the overall prices of the electricity cannot fluctuate enormously. We really cannot have an energy market that is going to have very, very variable energy prices that are not going to promote investment and equilibrium. So nuclear power plants are a clear example of resilient facilities, and this resiliency relies is the addition of several things. So when we are looking at the technical design, by design and beyond design, nuclear power plants are conceived following the principles of defense in depth, and they implement redundant, independent, and diversified safeguards that are designed to withstand external events. Then also from an organizational perspective, which is just as important as we have seen, unfortunately, in the midst of COVID, nuclear facilities also incorporate emergency and contingency plans to rapidly identify any critical activities and maintain the operations, the normal operations, even with limiting personnel and in constrained situations like as we have seen. So one thing that is quite remarkable about nuclear facilities is the nuclear industry has established for a very long time continuous improvement and continuous learning process. So we are always implementing the lessons learned from previous events. And then another thing that is quite important at the system level, a resilient low-carbon infrastructure requires, as I mentioned earlier, a balanced and diversified power mix. So this means that different technologies need to be included in the system, and all different technologies are going to have a very important role to play. So if we go to the next slide, I show you how nuclear has an important role to play in this balanced energy system, because nuclear energy plants are going to provide reliable base load electricity. Essentially, this is going to be available 24/7 as a very good complement to the other energy sources, including variable renewable energy sources. But it's important to point out that nuclear power plants can also work in a flexible manner. In fact, during the pandemic, nuclear plants were one of the principal sources of flexibility in Western Europe, complementing the operation of all the renewable energy sources. If we move to the next slide, I think that it's important to also remark that the nuclear sector is going to be quite important to help bounce back the economy. So investing in new nuclear generates a significant amount of skill, high-paid and mostly local, which is quite important, jobs for an extended period of time. So we are looking at jobs that are going to be available for 60 to 80 years, including the construction, the operation of the units, and then afterwards the decommissioning. Also,
Could I just interrupt, because I think we are running a bit on schedule. I think I've captured some of the key points you have. Perhaps it'll be more engaging to have we'll move to the Q&A session where we have some questions received from. If you don't mind, sorry about that. First of all, congratulations on your new role as the new Director General. So I like the fact that WNA and yourself are really thinking ahead while we continue to engage worldwide, in the current pandemic. And one thing that this pandemic has taught us is the ability to change, to pivot, the speed. And speed to electrification is really the key focus in a lot of the emerging markets that we have. For example, supply chain optimization, design optimization. We have seen offshore wind projects being reduced from 8 years to 5 years. Solar farms coming up within a span of 8 months, 6 to 8 months. So how does this electrification and speed fits in your new role?
Yes, thank you. No, you're quite right. Clearly, there is an urgency in deploying these low carbon electricity sources. So obviously, nuclear power plants are very large projects that are not going to be deployed in 6 months, as you just mentioned. So obviously, it is a large capacity addition, which is going to require a little bit more time. However, we have seen recent examples in Asia, actually, in China, in the United Arab Emirates, where in Korea, where we can add new nuclear energy capacity relatively quickly. In 5 years, a nuclear power plant can add a very large amount of long-term low carbon electricity. Also, I like to remark that there is the next, in addition to these large units, there is the small modular reactors that obviously they are much smaller, but the vision here is these reactors will be almost factory fabricated and they can be brought on site very quickly with minimum civil infrastructure construction and can be built very quickly. So obviously, in addition to the fast addition of the energy, and also it's very easy to adapt to the needs of the grid. So you don't need to add electricity in large chunks, they can be smaller, and obviously they will be much more affordable. So obviously nuclear is a different point of view, but also it's a longer term base load electricity.
Fair point, Dr. Sama. Thank you for that. Earlier on in the session, I briefly touched upon DMVGL's energy transition outlook, and one of the key findings we mentioned in that is really to invest in grid resiliency. We all know renewable energy brings all forms of intermittency, and you touched upon the flexibility the nuclear technology brings to the grid. So it's great to see. And it's good to have that whole energy mix that you touched upon. Capacity factor, you mentioned it quite a few times, but the topic or the word of the decade will be levelized cost of electricity. That is the very hot topic. We hear everyone talking about LCOE. We see LCOE prices reduction in solar, offshore wind drastically. Is this something WNA is advocating? And because you do need some selling points to promote the technology. So yeah, your thoughts on LCOE perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, yes, the levelized cost of electricity is going to be a key parameter that we are to look as we consider which technologies we are going to deploy in the future. So I would actually like to point out there is a new publication that is going to come out in the next very few weeks. It's a joint publication from the International Energy Agency and the Nuclear Energy Agency. It's called Projected Cost of Producing Electricity. That actually does a summary of the levelized cost of electricity for all energy sources in the next 5 years. And you will see here, as you said, that yes, it is clear that variable renewable energy sources have come down in price enormously. And you will also see that, in fact, new nuclear has also come down in price. It's certainly comparable to variable energy sources. But one thing that I think is important, and I mentioned earlier, in these new electricity systems that we are looking at as we move forward in the future, where we have not only baseload electricity, but also variable electricity, the levelized cost of electricity is no longer the only parameter that we need to look at. So one thing that is quite important, and the WNA and other organizations have been working on this, is to look at what are the system costs. So we really need to look at the overall cost of the electricity, including the plant level cost, that is the levelized cost of electricity, but then the overall system cost that includes all the spinning reserves that you need to have, the cost of being available whenever you need it due to variability, and of course to have the reserves in order to affront any specific crisis. So in that sense, I think that you are going to see that as we look forward analyzing what is the optimum energy mix. Levelized cost of electricity needs to be complemented with the system cost. And this is an area of work where we are working together with many other organizations.
Thank you, Dr. Sama. Very well said. Lastly, perhaps you talked about the footprint, and we know Asia has its fair bit of footprint in the nuclear technology. But again, bringing back to the point of access to electricity, some of the key markets you talked about was Philippines and Uzbekistan, where the generation is far from the actual demand that the current market has. So how critical is for WNA to have a roadmap to have this, to bridge this gap between the generation and the demand in these emerging markets, if I have to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, as I say, obviously each country will choose what energy mix is more suitable to them. But I do want to emphasize the importance of having a diverse energy mix. So obviously, when in countries such as the ones that I mentioned, and perhaps others, including in Africa and South America, we are trying to help these countries together with other organizations to really understand what is the role that nuclear can bring. And again, I think it's important to recognize that yes, nuclear energy can produce electricity, but don't forget that nuclear is also, I would say, the only low carbon energy source that can also produce low carbon heat. So this means that not only we can produce electricity, but nuclear energy can actually help decarbonize other sectors that are kind of difficult to abate. So this could be in combination with, for example, the production of hydrogen, but also you can look into heat for industrial sectors, for district heating, and etc. So I think that it is important for different countries to put together a long-term plan where different energy sources, clearly, obviously, variable renewable energy sources will probably play an important role, but you need to have a strong backup of baseload low carbon electricity. So in that case, if you are looking at that, the only few choices that you have are going to be hydropower if you have the resources, or nuclear power. So it's a matter of optimizing your resources and looking at your long-term plan.
Yeah, I completely agree, Dr. Sama. Having a critical base load to be sustainable is absolutely critical, because we have seen a lot of these blackouts happening in certain countries where there have been no kind of energy mix which can be kind of be sustainable. So I completely agree. You touched upon a little bit about some of the advances in the nuclear technology, like the modular installation, the advancement in the new technologies, how it is, and the cost reduction from looking at a system point of view. You talked about how WNA is continuously focusing on these emerging markets and banking on the technology into job creation, which is very, very, very critical in our current scenario. One of the questions that again, I mean, the audience is asking is, in your opinion, what are some of the most noteworthy advances in nuclear systems that we can kind of look forward to, to enable us to believe in the technology?
No, well, so I think that, well, first of all, I think that one of the things that is important about nuclear is it's been doing its job a little bit silently for the last 40 years. So as I mentioned at the beginning, for the last 40, 50 years, nuclear has been the backbone of the low carbon electricity. But then as we move forward, I think that nuclear is trying to diversify its offering. So traditionally, we had these large units, but I think that now we are seeing the small modular reactors that perhaps are going to be more suitable for these more distributed electricity grids that we are seeing. So these small modular reactors, first of all, are going to use different new technologies that are going to provide perhaps new advantages, maybe being more suitable for high temperature production, for the production of heat in addition to electricity. And then they are going to be quite suitable for perhaps these a little bit of remote locations. So you can put a smaller reactor in a remote location that can be a little bit disconnected from the grid. and maybe some other applications similar to that. So the thing is, I think that nuclear, the way I like to think of nuclear is a complement to all the other new technologies that are taking place. Clearly, everybody has the same objective, right? We all want to reach the Paris Agreement goals and decarbonize, while at the same time we need to make sure that the standard of living of everybody in the world is going to rise to an equilibrium, so we all have the same quality of life. So in that sense, obviously energy is going to be a number one necessity, and these new technologies that nuclear is providing, the large plants, the smaller plants, and everything in between are going to be quite suitable depending on the needs of different countries.
Yep. Thank you for the concluding remarks, Dr. Sama. And I think it's fair to say WNA is here to help in this energy transition and to really help out in providing that balanced portfolio for the specific market. So thank you so much for your insight, Dr. Sama. Have a good day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bilbao Yi Leon and Anurag. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the SIEW Energy Insights 2020. A big thank you to all our speakers and attendees for your participation. Please provide your feedback for the session via the feedback channel on the top right of the live stream window. The SIEW Energy Insights will be made available for on-demand viewing. We look forward to seeing you again at the Singapore International Energy Week 2021. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.